Have LCS Doomers gone too far? Does Riot still care about League of Legends? And was losing Dash and Freak a mistake? Not the questions we want to start a new season of League with, but questions that we definitely have to go over. Episode 109 of the Clown Fiesta podcast with Blue Jay and JNT250, our first episode of the year. It's good to be back. LCS is starting in just a couple of weeks. Uh, so even though not the most positive of topics, they are interesting, even if for all the wrong reasons. JNT, how was your break?
It was pretty good. I think this was like the first league off season where I really took like a long break from league. I didn't really play a whole lot during the off season. Pretty much when the ranked season stopped, I stopped playing. Altogether. But I'm like actually I'm feeling the passion. It's coming back.
Yeah, just seeing people get back into Champions Queue, even solo queue, watching Cadril VODs. Like I'm always a big fan of Cadril. I watched Broxa a little bit, play some solo queue. I've actually been enjoying getting back into League, as I always do. Right when you get 2 months off, you kind of eager to get back into the swing of things. Um, Not everything this episode will be all negative, guys. I can promise that because there are some good news. I mean, you got to go through a lot of the negative to find it, but there is some good things, such as some format changes for MSI and Worlds, and we will go over that stuff later on in the show. For now, JNT, have LCS Doomers gone too far? Let's start right there.
It's they've definitely gone a bit too far, but I think at the same time it's hard to say considering that we haven't actually seen anything yet. I know, the off season primarily, especially with regards to the topic of the LCS, as you said at the beginning, it's been a lot of negativity, and I think the main portion of that has to do with the schedule change that they made to the LCS, shifting the
Mhm.
games from Saturdays and Sundays now to Thursdays and Fridays. And while I think initially people were upset about the Thursday and Friday, the aspect that the people are most concerned about is the start times, which is 3 p.m. EST, meaning 12 p.m. PST. So, considering those start times and it now being on a weekday, I think that's kind of where all the negativity sort of came out the woodwork.
I am genuinely concerned. So I this is the first time that I actually think LCS Doomers have not gone too far. Every year, so this is what happens pretty much at the start of every LCS year. People always say, "Oh, the viewership is down, LCS is dying," and it's like, don't get me wrong, the viewership is down, but there's still a very healthy amount of people that want to watch the LCS. I think last year was like 100K people or something. If we were down to like 10K people viewing the LCS, okay, I'm more panicked. 100K, it's not what we want because of what we've seen in the past. It used to be way more, but there's still a large audience that wants to get to it. The reason why I think LCS Doomers this time around are not going too far is because I'm genuinely concerned about that 100K or whatever the number is now of people being able to access the LCS, right? That's been the discussion over the last month or so is that the scheduled times are messed up, like you mentioned, like so many other people have mentioned. And I don't know what to expect as far as how many people are going to be able to consume the product. What the biggest thing that I always say this about not just the LCS, but any league is like, make your league easy to consume. And God, are they making it difficult to consume being at 12 noon on the West Coast like that? I don't even know what to say about that. What is the audience going to sound like? Will there even be an audience? Like those things have dominoes effects.
Excuse me, sorry. It's definitely a quite awkward situation considering what was sort of brought along with these announcements. If you go back and check out those articles like I posted on LOL Esports, a lot of it seemed to be Riot's decision making, and part of the reason why they made this switch was due to a lot of data that they referenced throughout the both of these articles. And I think you know while obviously what data they're finding has value, I think the flip side of that coin is yes, while you're making the LCS by their own metrics accessible to more people by having it, on the workday, and they say that, was it 45% of LCS fans feel like they're exhausted at the end of the day. So, while I can understand the direction that they took it based off the data that they have and the way that they analyzed it, at the same time, you cannot ignore the fact that the LC part of the problem with LCS has been gaining new viewers. The decline in viewership, for the most part, of the LCS has not necessarily been attributed to the product becoming terrible. Yes, there might be a small inkling of that truth where the games aren't as good as they used to be. Maybe there's not as many rivalries, best of threes versus best of ones, that sort of discussion. But at the same time, the diehards of the LCS, they've always been around and they're still around. It was just more the casual viewers. not everybody now is waking up to watch a match with TSM versus CLG, but TSM versus CLG would net over like 3, 400, 500,000 viewers back in the heyday of the LCS. So while
Mm.
yes, this move potentially can make the LCS accessible to more people by their metrics, when you look at the flip side and you look at the diehards, the ones who are like us, who follow the LCS and have been for, 5, 10 years, it just makes things more difficult.
Yeah, the fear is that that data that they collected, a lot of people are afraid that it's flawed data, right? Because if their data is telling, like, we don't know exactly what their data is telling them, but if it's telling them, oh, there's a lot of European viewers that watch the LCS, well, that could just be because the LCS is on right after, and the LEC, or yeah, the LEC usually hosts the LCS, so that's probably why there's a big overlap of viewership there. But if the LEC is no longer on right before the LCS, is there still going to be those European viewers that are watching the LCS? That's just one of the many questions that people have brought up about, well, does the data take that into account? And I'm sure there's other variables as well that people need to consider. And getting back to the dominoes thing that I was talking about before, we just went through that pandemic and we know what happened. The casters said so many times what happened when there wasn't any fans in the audience. It was difficult for them to get hyped up, and therefore the actual product was hurt just because the casters weren't at their A game. And so that's something else that you have to wonder, is that now going to be affected if there's no one in studio? Now, I could be getting ahead of myself. Maybe the studio will still be full. We don't know that yet, but I'm definitely not expecting it to be full in the middle of a workday.
Yeah, I mean, people, if you don't know or forgot or whatever, the Riot Studio, where they broadcast all the games from, are on the West Coast. They are on Pacific time. The LCS
Yeah.
traditionally has always started at noon on the West Coast, but it's been on the weekends when people aren't, it's not the work week. People aren't working. People aren't going to school. You have the whole weekend, to sort of enjoy yourself and go to LCS if that's what you want to do. But at the same time, who is going to LCS on a Thursday at noon to watch, a game? And I think the other thing that goes sort of hand in hand with this, with the new scheduling, is the LCS hasn't really changed up the way that they schedule their matches. It's been a pretty stark difference when you look at LCS compared to LEC. LEC likes to get usually the more boring matches out of the way and always saves the best, or the last match as the best match. The match of the week, because they always pick a match of the week, is always the last game of the day. And with the
Yeah.
LCS, they traditionally did the inverse, because even though you might catch some of those LEC viewers that want to come watch LCS, they always made it important to put on a good game as the first game. And I think that sort of philosophy that they've initially had, they haven't changed that since they made, the shift to the new date and the new time. So I think if you're going to have a lot of these higher profile matches happen, towards noon, 1 p.m., 2 p.m., you're going to get a lot less eyes on those kinds of matches if you even had them at 3, 4 p.m.
Yeah. And that's the worry, right? I mean, well, one of the worries that is, amongst a list of many. Something else to get into is, well, the LCS isn't going to have all the same faces anymore as well, right? Dash, that's the latest one, is Dash no longer going to be part of the LCS. Freak mentioned not too long ago the same thing. He's going over to the balance team. And Pastry Time, even before that, mentioned that he was leaving. And it was like, these are long time personalities that the league is leaving. And so that's even more reason to be like, panic mode, I guess. Um, yeah, I don't know. When we talk about is the LCS dying, these things that pile up one on top of another is what makes me say that the Doomers, maybe they're not going too far, and maybe they have a point this time around.
Yeah, it's specifically with Dash, it'll be very interesting to see how the LCS structures the broadcast in terms of the focus of on the analyst desk. Obviously, Dash is the host of the LCS, so he sort of runs the show, leads the conversation, points people into certain directions, and then the analysts take over, and that's their realm. But I wonder if at all the LCS was looking over to the LEC and saw how Shocks, while she does and still is the primary host of that broadcast, there are weeks where she is not there and she's not involved. There might be weeks where she's out doing CS:GO, and sometimes we've seen Machine step in and be the host, who's funnily enough also a CS:GO host. So they're kind of like flip flopping their roles here. But I wonder if the LCS is going to do something similar, because Dash also did say that he will still be involved in the LCS to some capacity, just not the full time capacity that he once had. So I wonder if at all if the LCS plans to bring on different hosts, or if it's just going to be a complete 180 and they're going to have to restructure the whole analyst desk, broadcast segments like that.
I'm going to guess that is the second option because I watched almost all of Dash's stream after it was announced, where he was answering any questions. He was doing AMA kind of thing, and somebody asked him to kind of guesstimate or estimate, I guess, how much he's going to be on broadcast, and I think he said 2% as much as he was on before,
Wow,
which to me is like,
that's
oh,
nothing.
he's doing finals and that's it. That's I don't know. I'm guessing here, right? I don't want to pretend like I have all the info because I don't, but it sounds like way less Dash, which is kind of like that gives you the idea that things are changing. Um, Now I want to stay consistent with the whole Dash thing because I need to put my bias aside, and I guess maybe everyone needs to put their bias aside. I don't know, but obviously we're all fans of Dash. But JT, you know my opinion on what I think the LCS should do. I've mentioned this many times on the show, so I'm going to try to stay consistent. That I always mute in between games. I've said that many times, like, and it's not because I don't want to hear Dash. It's not because I don't want to hear Mark or Emily. Like, I'm literally fans of all of them. But for me personally, in between games, I'm just not ready for what I call like podcast talk or radio talk or whatever you want to call it, where like I'm just ready for the next game. I don't know if the LCS is going to get out of one game and hop into another game really quick, and that's why they don't need Dash anymore. I have no idea. But if they are going to not be bringing Dash back, I hope it's because they have a way of getting the games going quicker. I mentioned maybe 5-10 minutes ago that I think it's really important to make your product as accessible as possible, easy to consume. And I think the LCS broadcast has traditionally been about like 5 hours, right? About an hour per game. And so if they're trying to diminish the time in between games, I could see that being a positive, making a 5 hour broadcast into perhaps 4. I doubt 3, but maybe they try to make it to 3. And that might make the product easier to consume. The problem is that we're all really big fans of Dash. And so you just hear that Dash is leaving and everyone panics, myself included, because they haven't really told us what their plans are without Dash. Whereas, like, if they said, "Oh, the reason why is because we're doing this, that, and the other," then maybe fans would be a lot more understanding.
Yeah, no, it's definitely. I think one of the main problems that people in the community are definitely voicing their opinion about is we haven't got a single idea from Riot about the direction that the broadcast is moving. Because, we know that changes are coming, but we have no idea whatsoever what those changes might even look like. It's not even like
Right.
we can sit here and speculate all we want, but we have no idea if this is actually going to happen or if it's just going to be something completely different. And I think that's part of the problem that people have with Riot and the way that this is sort of transpired is, and this is something that we might reference later, but their lack of communication on this whole thing is just, it's a bit baffling.
Yeah, the communication from not just LCS but Riot altogether has been the talk of the town for the last little while. We'll get into more of the Riot
Mm.
stuff, the Riot lack of communication in a little bit, but right now with the LCS, there's been almost none, and so a lot of people are pretty pissed off with that. When it comes to the Freak thing, the Freak one, I don't really understand at all. Unless it's completely Freak's decision. I don't know if it is or whether it's not. Maybe you have more info on that. I don't.
No, I don't. I mean,
Yeah,
I've said this before. Freak was the best caster in the LCS for the last 2 years. I think there was a point where he sort of dipped a little bit, but in
yeah.
my
I would have said.
opinion, I
No,
think
go
Freak
ahead.
was the best.
Yeah, I would have said if you would have asked me 3 or 4 years ago, I would have said Freak is a good caster. The last couple of years, I thought he has gotten so much better, especially at Worlds this past year. My God, some of his calls were so good. And rarely, like most of the time, you kind of get lost in the game and you're not too concerned with who's actually casting it. I was ridiculously impressed with Freak, specifically at this past Worlds, and that's one where I don't understand. Like again, I still don't fully understand the getting rid of Dash, but like I could see a world where it makes sense if they're shortening up the broadcast. But you're still going to need shoutcasters for sure, and Freak is one of the best. Don't get me wrong, you still have Flowers, but you're losing Freak, you're losing Pastry, who I thought was also a really good caster. When he announced that he was leaving, I remember making a big deal about that on this podcast as well because I always thought Pastry was really underrated. And so I just think you're losing 1, 2, 3, and there's no explanation be had. And it's like, whoa, man, what the hell are we supposed to do with this information if you're not telling us anything?
Yeah, I think you kind of just mentioned it there, but Pastry Time was just kind of an underrated guy that I think a lot of LCS fans, looked over and kind of looked past. But whenever despite whoever he was casting with, I think he was one of the few people with regards to the LCS broadcast who did a really good job, and his casting didn't really change at all depending on whoever he was speaking with. It was just always consistently very good. I think now we sort of see, our caster sort of tandems, and for the most part, they don't go outside of those tandems. But Pastry Time just always felt like a really easy plug and play guy. You know it's going to be good.
Yeah. And I mean, we'll stick on the theme of communication because one of the other things that might change the LCS this year is lack of promotion. Another reason to be worried, right? They had this Boomer versus Zoomer event, which by the way wasn't bad. Like I can't say I thought it was the greatest thing ever, but I did genuinely enjoy it. I didn't feel like I was forcing myself to sit and watch it. I just watched the whole thing, no problem. So I enjoyed it. But the lack of promotion for it, or lack of promotion for the new season so far, has been pretty alarming. Now, in fairness, the league still has a couple of weeks, or about a week and a half rather, before it starts. So maybe they hammer home some promotion in this next week. I don't know. I freaking hope so. But we haven't seen much, and I mean, like I said, it's just one thing on top of another of why people might worry about the LCS and how the LCS is going to look this year.
Yeah, I think the other part of it just has to do with, lock in, was previously the tournament for the last 2 years now that they have been running pre beginning of spring split. And, while I think lock in didn't necessarily, provide that feeling that I think that the majority of LCS fans were looking for, I think at the same time, it still did a very, very good job of promoting some of the newer players that are coming into the league, whether they're rookies, whether they're veterans who are getting imported from around the world. Just served as a really good starting point for teams to get back into the swing of things with LCS, understand some of the new players and faces that they're going to see, for the most part. And I think they did a little bit of that in the Boomers versus Zoomers event. They had Busio playing as a support for Team Zoomer, but I don't think that there were no other, was there any other rookie players that were making their like LCS debut on any of those teams? I don't think there were.
I don't
It was just
remember.
Busio.
They
So,
had tenacity on the cast to cast the
well,
third
yeah,
game.
that's true, I
Like you get
guess.
to know the personality, I guess, a little bit.
But I guess my,
But
my, my point here is like for the average fan, like they're gonna have literally no clue who half of these players are in the LCS. And as you mentioned before, we still have a week and a half to go. But for them to potentially release no promotional pieces on any of the rookies, any of the newer players, new look teams, stuff like that, it's just alarming and just cause for concern in general.
yeah, the vibes going into the season are not excitement. Like it's supposed to be excitement, and it's panic, really.
Yeah,
The one thing I will say though is that even though I personally prefer the lock in, I get why they don't do it because every year there was visa issues, which I remember thinking as I was watching Boomers versus Zoomers, it was like, was there no visa issues this year? Like, have we
yeah.
not heard anything? Like, would this have been the year that a lock-in tournament actually would have been successful and teams would have been able to field their full rosters? I wonder. Anyway.
It's funny because I remember, I think this was before the Boomers versus Zoomers thing, but Cloud9 posted a picture on their Twitter and it was just like, no missing passports this time, smile. And it was like the whole team.
Yeah.
So, you know, I personally haven't even heard anything with any of the teams with regards to visa issues. So it would be kind of funny the year they get rid of the lock in tournament is the year that we don't have any visa issues.
It is possible that the reason we haven't heard of visa issues yet is because they haven't had to.
Yeah.
Like if the
We,
lock-in
we
tournament
might,
was
yeah, yeah.
happening and there was visa issues, then
We'd,
somebody
we'd
would have
know
had to
about
say,
them.
"Hey,"
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it could be that there are some problems with that happening right now. We're just unaware. But yeah, the irony of like the lock-in being let go because, well, probably because of visa issues and then not having any is a little bit unlucky. But I agree with their decision to do the kickoff event this way because you know that you'll have the players to do it. Last year there was like TSM put their whole academy roster in. There was a bunch of missing pieces on different teams. It just wasn't. I think the idea of the lock-in is much better than the practicality of it. Even though I still enjoyed the lock-in the couple of years that they did, I thought it was great, but it didn't work out that way.
Yeah, it
Um,
just it just felt weird because not all the teams had their full rosters. It just didn't feel like it was, an LCS tournament. It felt like it was something else.
yeah, the one other thing that like kind of disappoints me a little bit as far as communication goes was when this news was dropped about the times and everyone was pissed off, that was at the time that Jackie Felling, the commissioner, went on like a break for mental health issues. And what was really disappointing to me was not the fact that she couldn't reply, but that there was nobody else to pick up the pieces. Like, how is this league being run? If Jackie's not there, then like no one else can step in. That's the other issue that I have with communication is like this is a team thing. Where are the people that like help each other out and stand in for when someone needs help or whatever the case may be, right? So that was the other thing that I was like, wow, this is really really embarrassing. Not even just for the LCS, but as fans of the LCS. Like where is everyone working on this league?
Yeah, I mean, not to speculate or anything, but having, Jackie Felling's name pop up over the last month, with regards to all this, changes to the LCS and poor messaging and whatnot from LCS/Riot is it just it just you have to fear for that thought in the back of your mind where like she was the person who, she was the commission of the Call of Duty League, and that league kind of didn't turn out to be what it was supposed to be, and I have that slight fear that she was just set up to be the fall woman here, and she was just not. She is and is not in a position to succeed with kind of
It just
everything
added
else crumbling around her.
fuel to the fire, am I right? Like,
Yeah,
that the reason she steps down in the first place is because she's getting like having some mental health issues, and then of course this news drops, and no one is there to pick up the slack, and of course she gets shit for that too. Oh my god, man, that is so that's infuriating.
it's
That is so
just
feels
a
bad.
shit show.
Now, okay, I do want to switch over a little bit to some positivity a little bit. I mean, it depends on who you are, but co-streams, they've changed how that is going to look. So that might give a new look to the LCS, right? Everyone's allowed to co-stream, or how's that working exactly?
So yeah, the co-streaming rules were updated. We are back to the initial system of co-streaming where all the games can be co-streamed. Previously, it was only on super weeks and during playoffs, finals, and whatnot. But now we're back to every game being able to be co-streamed, and they've expanded the like creator pool beyond just the people whom they invited. I know I Will Dominate's back in that because they unbanned him from like the league partner program, but you can also now apply to be a part of the co-streaming, watch party, whatever they call it. Obviously, you have to be a content creator within the stream, and there's an application process, but anyone can apply, which is good. So expect there to
So you're
be.
saying we should apply?
I mean, yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah,
Get the
yeah.
people
Let's get in
behind
there.
us. We'll get a petition. Be like, hey, man, we really want to see. Like, we'll get all the viewers to sign a petition.
Yeah,
It'll be good.
and that that change had to make like you needed to make that change if you were going to get rid of Dash, right? If you were going to have no one host the thing, or I mean, I guess in theory no one hosts. Maybe they have somebody else
That's one.
deciding
I
to
didn't even
host it.
think
I don't
about
know.
that, but that makes a lot of sense. What you're saying.
Yeah, so this probably went hand in hand with no longer requiring Dash to be on the streams. Now, I love the co-streams. I mean, I like the regular broadcast too, but regular listeners know that I love the co-streams. I am a little sad that Doublelift won't be a part of the TriCast
Yeah,
anymore.
I wonder if they're gonna bring in somebody else, or if it's
Well,
just gonna be the
like,
duo
don't
now.
get me wrong. Like, Meteos and Sneaky will be fine. They're great together. But I always loved when Meteos would make fun of Doublelift. Like, I always thought that was super funny. So I'm gonna miss that a little bit. But I guess the good side is that you got Doublelift back in the league, right? So
Hmm.
if you're gonna lose him to the co-stream, well, where do you want Doublelift playing, right? So that's pretty good.
Exactly.
Um,
And then another small things a little bit related to the co-streams. We're doing some speculation slash estimated guessing here, but within that co-streaming article that they posted on All Esports, there was a section of it that talked about creators cannot have conflicting sponsors with the LCS, and Monte Cristo made a tweet about that, saying that uh, insurance and beer companies were not within that list of potential sponsor conflicts. So we're doing some estimated guessing here, but we can maybe assume that uh, State Farm and Bud Light have no longer re-upped their sponsorships with the LCS, and that's another thing to sort of consider when it comes to potentially them restructuring the broadcast, maybe having less money to pay people like Dash. So it's another sort of piece to the puzzle here, which I assume we're not going to get any answers to anytime soon, but we might figure some stuff out over the next coming weeks.
I hope they made the decision to let go of Dash after finding out that State Farm was no longer going to re up. Because I would have to assume that the State Farm sponsorship would have paid for Dash's salary and probably more on top of that. So if they're like, sorry, Dash, we don't need you. we'll move on. Oh, State Farm will stick around anyways, and then they decide not to. They might be like, oh shit, undo. I wish, can we bring back Dash now so we can have an analyst desk and so that we can have the State Farm analyst desk? Just something I was wondering about anyways.
Yeah.
That would be a really bad move if they thought that they could get rid of Dash and keep an analyst desk sponsor. Cuz it just doesn't seem to be the case. The other thing too is I think people that do the co-streams should kind of look to have Dash on every once in a while. Like, let's be real, he's still a great personality on camera. There's a lot of people that are upset that he got taken off the LCS broadcast in the first place. If I'm Dom or LS or whoever does the co-streams, I'd be like, "Hey, Dash, you want to come on for a couple of, weeks? Like, people will watch because Dash is there." Just saying. The
And
guy's
then
good. He's a good on-camera personality.
I think the last point we have here on the LCS broadcast and whatnot is we'll take a little trip down memory lane. I believe it was our last episode of 2022. It's sort of right when the FTX collapse was happening, and we had a little bit of discussion with regards to the TSM side of things, because that's obviously when it was in the off season. They were going through all their roster building, and there were serious questions about how much TSM was maybe going to invest in the LCS this year because of losing all that money from FTX. Well, let's not forget, the LCS also has a pretty big deal with FTX. They had a big contract. It was $96 million over a 7-year span. And apparently, according to an article and some documents, that Riot has only been paid half of the agreed upon $12.5 million for the calendar year of 2022. And I think it's pretty safe to assume that they are not going to see the rest of the money from that contract. So once again, another piece of the puzzle is, are the finances of the LCS just in general decreasing, losing this FTX deal, State Farm and Bud Light potentially not re-upping their deals? Well, I mean, time will tell very quickly, but we can assume that they didn't re-up their deals. So it's just another sort of terrible thing.
I'm surprised they got half. Right? Like,
that's fair. Yeah.
Like, I mean, maybe the glass is half full, because we all know that FTX owed a lot of people a lot of money. The fact that the LCS was able to get half out of it, not the worst, I suppose. If you want to, again, glass half full kind of deal. But these are all angles that are going to contribute to the LCS looking different. And quite honestly, when you ask the question, how will the LCS change? I think there's a lot of people that don't really know the answer yet. Right? We
Yeah.
figure the budget has to be down. We know that the personalities aren't the same. We know that they're not even at the same time of schedule, different days. Lots of issues that we're going to see a different product, and we don't know in what way that's going to look. We just know it's going to look different.
Yeah, I guess one thing that I would say that the LCS does have going for them a little bit is I just think the general interest in the LCS teams is higher than in years prior, and I think a lot of that does have to do with some of the rosters that the teams put together, because it's just, at least at the beginning, and maybe this happens at the beginning of every single year, but it doesn't feel like there is a set top 5 and bottom 5 going into this
the
split.
rosters do look very competitive for the most part. There seems to be a lot of parity. So yeah, that is something for LCS fans to look forward to. I just wonder how many fans are going to have to consume it by watching VODs, or how many of them will want to do it by watching VODs.
Yeah, and I should say in the same breath, that's just a missed opportunity on the LCS's part in terms of the lack of promotion that we've seen over the last however many weeks. The season's supposed to start in a week and a half. We got all these hype teams and hype players that are coming over. Guess what? They haven't told us shit about them.
Yeah, some cool storylines. Like, I'm gonna be so focused on whether Spica can come back and be the Spica we want to see, right? Like, he's finally off of TSM, weights lifted off of his shoulders. He's free now.
Yeah, he's out of the Super Barrack time chamber, or whatever the hell it's
And
called.
there's many more, but that's a episode 110 kind of thing. Before we move on to our next topic, just some shout outs to do, guys. If you're new to the channel and you're enjoying the content, you know what I'm going to say. Subscribe on YouTube. We are available on Spotify, on YouTube, as I said. What else? What other podcast platforms, Jinter?
All Anchor supported podcast platforms, Google Podcasts, and a bunch of random ones.
Right. So
Apple
lots
Podcasts,
of ways,
a lot of them.
ways to get our content. Make sure to hit the like button and comment as well. That helps YouTube know to recommend our content to other people. It helps us out tremendously. On top of that, we have to plug our good buddy Luis. A lot of you guys will notice that our look is a lot different this year. Our friend Luis did a layout for us. He's got a new logo for us. He's been doing our thumbnails for the last year. If you want to see his stuff, we will have a link in the description where he's got a little portfolio. You could go to our YouTube channel and just scroll through. You'll start to notice at what point he started doing our thumbnails because they look way better than what we had before. And we just need to shout him out, guys. If you are doing content yourself, highly recommend reaching out to him. His email, we'll also put that in the description, but his email is lk@lkrico.com. That is lk@lkrico.com. And you'll see he does different games, League of Legends, TFT, whatever you need, he can do it for you. And the prices, I would have to imagine, are very reasonable because he's been nothing but reasonable with us. Last thing, announcement. We already recorded it today because we had some scheduling issues, but episode 110 has already been recorded and it contains a special guest. We had Cubby. A lot of you guys will know Cubby from the Academy scene, now known as the NACL, the Challengers League. Cubby joined us for episode 110 that we recorded earlier today, and that episode will be coming out about a week from this recording. And so stay tuned and subscribe to get the recommended in your YouTube feed the episode with Cubby. Uh, he was great, honestly. He fills a lot of the gaps that J&T and I have about the newer players coming into the league. We don't necessarily know all of that much about them. Cubby helped us out a lot with that, and it was awesome having him on. So couldn't recommend more. Listening to that episode, really enjoyed it. And I guess the last thing I'll say is episodes should be done live every Sunday now, right, J&T? That's our plan.
Yes, that seems to be the tentative schedule as of yet. We will probably confirm that within at least a week or two, especially when the
Yeah.
LCS season is going to kick off. But aim is Sunday nights around 7 p.m. EST. That would be 4 p.m. PST, with a similar plan of getting that YouTube video up Sunday night, Monday morning type thing.
Yeah, at the latest you'll have it Monday morning before the work week. So that's the hope anyways, and so that's how things are going to look for now. Um okay, let's move on because there's also not only are people worried about the LCS, but soon after people became worried about League of Legends altogether. And the question that people are raising is, well, does Riot even care about or about League of Legends anymore? J&T, I'll let you start.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like this sort of went hand in hand to begin with the announcement of the LCS shifting days on the broadcast from the weekend to Thursday and Friday, and the primary reason for doing so was because Valorant is now taking over the LCS studio, which I know they renamed to something. I think it's like the Riot. I don't know what I don't have the name for it, but it's like the Riot Broadcasting Studio or like Riot something Studio, but they renamed it from the LCS Arena to include Valorant. Obviously, Valorant is now going to have that premier time slot of Saturdays, Sundays, and Mondays, I believe they're also playing on. But I can't confirm. It's definitely at least Saturday, Sunday. I'm not a big Valorant guy, so that's not my area of expertise. But I think initially when we heard those talks, even a couple months ago, sort of during Worlds and hearing all this sort of whispers about that, people then, even now, we're getting concerned. Does Riot even care about League anymore? Because we're seeing a bunch of this stuff that's come out in the last couple weeks now with regards to the cinematic that they released for the start of the season, the fact that the start of the season announcement came so late into the off season. I mean, there's just like a plethora of things. You know, Riot is now have to be releasing apology after apology tweet on their Twitter for the last like 4 days now. You know, Riot, Bright Moon, and Medler, they had to put out a video. So it feels like the community sentiment is that Riot doesn't really care about League anymore, and people can only assume that based off of what they're actually doing, which is giving away the prime time spot to Valorant and releasing less content, and people being upset with the progression that the game has been in for the last year now. So it's just a wild conversation.
I am on the side to say they do still care. Although I will admit that I was not even worried about caring a month ago. Once you saw that there was no cinematic, that's the one that really got people because, I mean, let's be real, they set the bar really high for themselves last year, and all their other cinematics were great to start off a year, but I think last year's was absolutely stunning, like chills how good it was, and people were just blindsided by this new video that was not even close to as good as what that was. And so people were wondering, is the budget just gone for League of Legends? What's going on? the reason why I do still think they do care, and I think we'll only find out over the next year or two whether that is truly the case, is I think they did get the message. I think that, look, the only thing they could do now after messing up so bad is acknowledge that they messed up, and they did that. Now that doesn't mean everything's saved, right? There's still a lot of work for them to do. But step one is to admit that you made a mistake and reach out to your community and saying, look, this is what we're hearing from you and this is what we plan to do about it. And that's why I say we'll only find out over the next year or two whether talk actually becomes action. And that's why there's a lot of people that are still hesitant, because talk does not mean, well, I mean, people value talk differently, right? Some people, it's like, oh, okay, I believe them and they're never going to think about it again. And then there's some people that are just like, nope, you've hurt me too many times and I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid anymore. So I guess we'll have to wait and see, but I genuinely do believe them. J&T, am I a fool to believe their apology videos and whatnot, or what
I
do you
mean,
think?
it's hard to say because, in sort of the grand scheme of things, whether it's, Riot or LCS related, it does feel like we're starting to hit a bit of a snowball effect where, no matter what they do, people just seem to hate on it. Whether or not it actually ends up being a good thing or, changes at
True.
all, it just feels like the norm now is to hate on whatever the changes that are being made. And yes, it is definitely important that Riot came out and acknowledged the community and said, "Hey, guys, we fucked this up and we acknowledge it." But at the same time, even in that video that Riot, like Bright Moon and Riot Meddler, had to come out and deal with, is they basically just said that like internally the whole league team was like in a really bad spot when it came to the turnover rate for employees. They talked about like their rotating game mode team basically became the TFT team. So they had no more team that was dedicated on focusing on rotating game modes, which has been a big thing that people have talking about for like 2 to 3 years now. Like the fact that they're only doing Earth now, Nexus splits, like they didn't even revisit that this past year. So while it's admirable that they acknowledge these things and they say that they're going to do better, at the same time, when they openly admit how destroyed that their league team was internally and say, "Oh, we didn't even think to like let you guys know about this or to let you guys know that the content that we release is not going to be what you normally expect for the year 2022." It just does not make any sense to me that you can say that we knew that things internally were going to be really bad and we decided to just say nothing about it. And we expected everything to go with what it's normally been, and we're going to release subpar stuff that's not what you're used to. And then, I wouldn't say are necessarily surprised when people hate on it, but like it did feel like, League was doing damage control with all these like apologies that they had to tweet out.
Yeah. And I think, look, they admitted in their video or in one of their apology videos or whatever that some of the things they need to do to regain respect is to get new game modes out and to do a better cinematic next year. But I think some of the things that, like, if they really want to show that they're listening and not just ignoring, I think the big thing is the client. How many times have people talked about the League client? It's been a topic of discussion. It feels like for a decade that people hate this client. And well, that's the thing to me that makes people feel ignored, because that one's been the talk forever.
Yeah.
Forever, people have talked about how they need to fix the League client. So if you want to show, hey, we're no longer ignoring you, I think that would be a pretty good place to start, despite the fact that I think they need to do far more than just the client. That's the one that I think has lingered, and I think is one of the bigger ones for why people feel ignored.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. That's sort of just the base of all of the untrust that people seem to have in what the content that Riot is releasing is. Because you're correct. Like people have been complaining about the client for years now, and I don't know when it was. I can't remember if it was 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, when Riot did say that they were starting to like work on a better client. But when have we even heard anything since then?
Yeah, and Unbeheld in the live chat says, I don't think the client fix is that simple, honestly. I don't think it's a simple thing either, but I do know that Riot has the resources to make a better client. And that's something that people have been asking for forever.
And
So
yeah,
even if
well,
it's not an easy job, it is a doable job. And that's why I say start with that.
and while I agree that it's not a simple fix, however, the people have been screaming for fixes for years.
Yeah.
And if you waited 3 years and then just started doing it now, like so what, you just been ignoring all of the attention for the last for the 3 years prior. So
And
it's not a good base or precedent for people to have and just blindly trusting Riot going forward and say, hey, yeah, we are going to fix all these things. Well, the main thing that we've been complaining about, you haven't even bothered to fix yet. So I can understand where all of the untrust from the community is towards Riot. But at the same time, it's a bit of a two-way street here. Like we do got to trust them at some point. But the problem is a lot of the actions before that has sort of led up to this point have not
Yeah,
been in our favor.
they've let fires just sit there, right? They have so many fires to put out, but it's not because they don't have the resources to put them out. They've just let them linger in a way, right? And Bright Moon said that they have more budget this year than they've ever had. It's like, okay, well, let's see what they do with it, because if you have more budget than ever, I think it's fair to expect some solid changes and some improvement, even if it will take time.
Mm.
Uh, shall we move on to some more good news, perhaps, JT?
Definitely good news, I would say.
Format changes. Where are we starting?
Well, we'll start with the LEC because while we did briefly discuss this on one of our last episodes of 2022, we do have sort of the official, announcement of it, and so I'll try to get through it as quick as possible, but you'll have to bear with me here. So, LEC, their games are now moving to Saturdays, Sundays, and Mondays. They're now going to have 3 splits instead of 2 splits, and then 1 season finals at the end, which I think, for lack of a better word, let's just call playoffs at the time. There are still playoffs within each of the 3 splits, but this is like the mega playoffs, we'll call it.
Yeah.
So within each split, there's 3 stages: a regular season, a group stage, and a playoffs. The regular season is like the normal regular season that we've had in the LCS and the LEC for the majority of its time. Best of ones. However, now it's only a single round robin of best of ones instead of a double, because normally the LCS and the LEC, you play every team twice. Now you only play every team once. Past that, the top 8 of the 10 teams advance to the group stage. In the group stage, the 8 teams get split into 2 teams of 4. Now, they switch from best of ones to best of threes, where the top teams from each group will advance to the playoffs, and then the number 2 teams will also advance to the playoffs from those groups. Playoffs, being 4 teams now, is best of 5s, with the 4 top teams playing in a bracket with the 2 number 1 seeds in the upper bracket, the 2 number 2 seeds in the lower bracket, and it's just a normal playoff bracket. Winner wins the split. Obviously now there is 3 splits that are happening. MSI happens between the spring and the summer split now for the LEC. So I guess
they do 2 splits and then they do MSI.
Yes, I guess I forgot to mention that now the first split in the LEC is called the winter split. So it's winter split, spring split, summer split. MSI happens in between spring and summer. Now to move on to the mega playoffs, as I just dubbed it. Each winner of the split for the 3 splits is auto guaranteed a spot in the mega playoffs. Within the mega playoffs, it's 6 teams, the 3 split winners, and then the 3 teams who have the most championship points throughout all 3 splits. Yes, they're bringing back championship points. If you don't know what championship points are, I don't know what to tell you. That's been kind of a staple of League for quite a long time now. There is some specific scenarios where if a team wins multiple splits, they're guaranteed a higher seeding in the mega playoff bracket, and if you win all 3 splits, you guaranteed qualify for Worlds, and you are automatically the number 1 seed going into the playoffs. I got my ramble out of the way. But overall, very good changes for the LEC. I like it.
Do you have any concerns? I do have some of my own.
Okay, well.
Should I start with those?
Sure.
I don't know how I feel about the LEC being 3 days. I think I will be more than happy to watch Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I don't really know how other people are going to feel about that. Like, you're asking people to commit a lot more time to the league. Now, maybe the LEC has no issues with that. But the LCS, when they tried Mondays and Friday nights, didn't have so much success. The other thing I will have to say, though, is that when the LCS did that, it was only 2 games, right? So if your favorite team wasn't playing on Monday or Friday with the LCS, then maybe you just didn't bother tuning in whatsoever. And so viewership was really low on that days. With all 5 teams playing, maybe they have a much better shot. So that's something that I'm going to keep a close eye on, but it's something I'm a little bit worried about. My other concern is the 3 splits. I wonder if that's too many. Like, does a finals of a split feel hype anymore if there's 3 of them and then there's a playoff afterwards? It feels like it gets a little bit redundant of finals and finals and finals and finals, but I could be wrong. What do you think of my concerns?
Yeah, I guess, the main thing that I think drove a lot of these changes, I'm going to assume, once again, is that there are just more games being played for all the teams. yes, there is a special case where the two teams who do not make it out of that initial regular season of each split, they actually play slightly less games than the LEC is normally accustomed to.
Right.
And this was something that was talked about when all this speculation was going on. And even when we discussed this topic in 2022, I do remember we brought up a Reddit post where it took, in this example format, it took the total number of games for every single team, seeds 1 through 10, and seeds 9 and 10 were playing slightly less games during a regular season. However, the number of games increase for the 8th team all the way up to the first team is so much more. I think like for 8 it's like 27 now instead of 18, and then for 7 it gets to 36, 5 is also 36, 4 is like 72, 3 72, 1 and 2 are like 78 and 82 or something like that. I mean, I'm not exactly correct here, but it is a lot more games for those more upper echelon teams, and hopefully for the LEC's sake make them a bit more prepared for the World Championship.
So overall, I really like the format. And what's interesting to me is that I think this format would be better for North America, because North America is traditionally the league that has your Immortals and Dignitas. Those are usually the two teams that we pick on, but usually the two teams that are sitting at the bottom, not really investing in any, talent or even trying all that hard. Um, and so I think like this whole ninth and 10th place doesn't get to continue to play games would be really would be even more helpful in the LCS's case than in the LEC, if you ask me.
Yeah, I think, I'm always not necessarily the biggest fan of the LCS just copying and pasting what works for the rest of the leagues, but at the same time, if it works for them, it should also, work for us,
But we
The
don't know if it's
LCS.
working for them yet,
Well,
right? We haven't
exactly.
done a split of this just yet.
That's why I think we'll have to sort of wait a year, see how sort of the dominoes fall, and then I would hope that the LCS adopts this, format if it proves to be, worth, and it makes things potentially more exciting having 3 splits, more games. I mean, at the same time, I understand your first point that you made about if there's too many finals, like if that reduces the sort of the intensity or the value of those. But at the
Hmm.
same time, finals is what people crave. People love to see those like slugfest best of fives, and with this
Yep.
format, we're going to get more of them. So I think, I guess one last thing that I'll say about this is just to throw it back to your other initial point where you said, is 3 days too much? I would agree with that because I think when the LCS did do a full set of games for 3 days, this was when they did 5 games Friday, 5 games Saturdays, 5 games Sunday. That was directly after the Monday night, Friday night league sort of experiment. It did feel like a bit too many games to have 15 every single week. So
Yeah.
I would say that but with this format, they kind of had to do that because they have to get all the games. They need enough days to play all the games.
How do you fit it all into three
Yeah,
splits and then a mega playoff, as you're
yeah.
calling
It
it?
it does feel like that there could be some tweaks that might happen after a split, or I guess I shouldn't say a split, or a full year of
Yeah.
of this format.
Well, and I know a lot of people are going to be surprised at this, but traditionally the LCS has actually been the league to try something different. And usually because it's the LCS, people just hate on it, whether it's actually good or not. But I'm thinking back to like when they combined spring and summer. Yes, a lot of people didn't like that, but it was experimentation. And so I think it's nice that for once you got one of the other leagues saying, like, we're going to experiment, and the LCS can just sit back and watch. Not to say that the other leagues have never experimented. That's not what I'm saying. But a lot of the times the LCS has experimented, and things haven't worked out, and so it's like it's just nice that for once the LCS can try to keep something consistent. Although they change the schedule every fucking split, but
Yeah, I
it's
wonder if, because I'm pretty sure if I'm remembering this correctly, LCS made the shift to best of 3, and or EU LCS at the time didn't do it until the split after.
they did best
LCS.
of twos.
Yeah,
No,
but I'm pretty sure the way that it worked out was in season 6 summer, LCS went BO3, and then I think it wasn't until season 7 spring that EU LCS did best of twos.
it's funny to think
I'd
back on all
like
the
I'd like to say
changes.
that the LCS pioneered that change, that the L or EU LCS kind of copied, but they did best of two, so they
Probably
didn't
not.
really
It's probably
copy it.
still the LCK. Like it's probably the LCK that they're copying, right? Like
Oh,
it's
definitely, but
LCK is doing well, or LPL for that matter is doing well. Like let's do what the good leagues are doing and find a way to make it best of threes. And it's so funny to look back as to like when the LCS did best of threes, and I remember being so excited. Like yes, this is awesome. Now mind you, back then I didn't really give a shit what the viewership was like. I was a diehard Cloud9 fan at the time in season 6, and so I was like, sweet. I get to watch maybe 3 Cloud9 games, So back then it was super hype, but you didn't really realize at the time how much you were kind of hurting the product by making it so difficult to watch for people that were far more casual viewers, right? You were asking them to watch so much League of Legends and it just didn't have the time.
Hmm. But
Hindsight though.
yeah, no, I do follow your logic though. I was like, oh, more Cloud9 games, let's go.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah.
How awesome was it, man? I remember being so excited. How times change.
All right, then we can shift over to the MSI format changes,
Yep.
which are not to be trifled with because MSI no longer is one team from every region. Now there'll be two teams from the LCS, the LPL, the LEC, and the LCK. So it kind of, MSI, there was a lot of varying opinions on it. I know for yourself, you always just didn't really like MSI that much.
Yeah, I was kind of like, eh. It was the least hyped time of the year for me, despite the fact that I still enjoyed watching it. I enjoyed spring more, I enjoyed summer more, and obviously I enjoy worlds more. So I'm a lot more optimistic about MSI with these changes, though.
But I think a lot of people shared sort of that same sentiment when it came to MSI, where hey, it's only like one team from every region. Doesn't it shouldn't really matter for that much, and there's not enough games in it to begin with for it to be this big hyped up international tournament. But have no fear, the changes are coming. So MSI now, it's two stages: the play-in stage and the bracket stage, kind of similar to how it's been. However, the play-in stage will be 8 teams. The number one team from all the minor regions, which are the LLA, the CBL, the PCS, the VCS, and the LJL, in addition to the second seeded teams from the LEC, the LCS, and the LPL. If I missed a region right there, you are correct. It's the LCK, because the LCK second seed auto advances to the bracket stage along with the number one LCK team, number one LPL team, number one LEC
Quick
team,
question.
and number one LCS team.
I got a quick question. Is that just because they win worlds? Is it just
Yes,
the team that won worlds prior gets the 2 seeds
that
automatic?
was the reasoning laid out in the article.
Okay.
We can assume that if for example, the LPL won MSI in 2023, that would shift if they won Worlds in 2023, that would make MSI 2024 the LPL 2 seed auto advances. So
Gotcha.
I
Okay.
believe so, but yeah.
Carry on.
Similar to what we've seen already in play-in tournaments, the 8 teams will be drawn into 2 groups of 4 with double elimination best of 3s. That's right, no best of 1s, best of 3s. The 2 highest seeds will advance to the bracket stage along with the 5 teams who had already auto-qualified, as well as one more team will be played to find out who that 8th and final team will be moving on to the bracket stage. It's whoever. There's a best of 5 played between the top teams who aren't the number 1 seeds, basically. So the whole point here is no best of 1s. We're getting a lot of best of 3s and best of 5s. The bracket stage now is the 8 teams who advance from the 3 teams who advance from the play-in stage and the 5 teams that are already there. It's double elimination best of 5 brackets. So
the takeaways, or what people really want to hear, is LCS going to be able to play more games and more games against competitive regions? Like, we won't see. Remember when we had to see what G2 and EG play the OS League? Like, how many
yeah,
games did they
4
have to
times
play?
each. They all played each other 4
Yeah,
times.
that was kind of trash. And
Yeah.
now we should be getting, I mean, we don't know because you don't know how teams are going to perform, but it gives a higher chance of the LCS playing more best of 3s against like Europe, for example,
Mhm.
which is mainly what people want to see, right?
And obviously in the bracket stage, now they're being double elimination best of 5s.
Yeah.
It's a change that everybody has been asking for. And unfortunately, Worlds doesn't necessarily bring the same changes, but there are still some changes coming to Worlds.
Yeah, the MSI changes make me much more excited for the tournament, whereas in the past I just wouldn't have been as excited. Do we want to hop over to the Worlds ones now?
Last thing I will say is that MSI is confirmed to be in London, England, May
Oh,
2nd to
true.
May 21st. Do with that information what you will.
Actually, the one thing that I wanted to ask, I don't know if you have this information. Back to the LEC thing, are they going to do like a finals in a stadium for all of those splits?
I don't know. I do not have
That
that
seems like
info.
that would be a little bit much to get like massive venues for 3 splits, and then I would assume also one for a mega final
It's
or
probably
mega.
it's probably safe to assume that for the mega playoffs, as I dubbed it, that'll be in some like epic
That'll be the big
location.
venue.
Yeah.
Yeah, time will
Um.
tell.
Yeah, and then last up we have the World Championship. Worlds 23 is in South Korea. We are back on the correct timeline of it alternating between Korea, China, NA, and Europe. There is now 4 stages at the World Championship.
Oh
There's
god,
the
yeah.
Worlds Qualifying Series, just the WQS. It's a play-in. There's the Swiss, and there's the knockout stage. Now, I'm going to actually start with the knockout stage because the knockout stage is exactly the same as it is. There has unfortunately been no changes made to that. The 8
From
teams.
like quarterfinals on is
Yeah.
what the
The
okay.
knockout stage is quarterfinals, semifinals, finals. Unfortunately, no changes. The 8 teams who promote from the Swiss stage, which used to be the group stage, go into the knockout stage. It's a bracket with single elimination best of fives. I know in the article that talked about these changes, Riot's sort of sentiment was that they still want these best of fives to feel very like high intensity. It's, you get one shot to win it all and that's it. And while I think that people are going to be disappointed that it's not double elimination best of fives because that's what people have been asking for it feels like 2 years now. At the same time, I understand Riot's decision making behind this because at the same time, you would not probably have the sort of DRX story that we got if there was potentially double elimination games. And
Hard to
obviously,
say, right?
DRX going and winning it all. It's a credit to them, and it's one of the reasons why they won Worlds because when it mattered, when it counted, they were performing. But at the same time, we might not have gotten that. We might have seen Damwon drop into the lower bracket from T1 and then, make their way back up because we all thought that Damwon was going to be potentially in the finals there with how well Showmaker and Canyon were playing. So
Right.
it being single elimination is going to make for those storylines that people love. But, it's at the trade off of not having double elimination.
And I have to remind people that we did get what was probably the best worlds we've ever had. Now, that's not to say that it couldn't have happened with Damwon and T1 or whoever else it could have been, but we did have an amazing world championship, and it was in that format where it wasn't double elim. So I guess I understand why people want double elim. I just think it's not the end of the world if you don't have it.
Okay.
But
Well, now we will jump back to our initial conversations here, starting with the World's Qualifying Series. So, as of right now, it's only going to be 2 teams that go to this World's Qualifying Series. It's a single best of 5 between the number 4 LEC team and the number 4 LCS team.
how
Winner goes
awesome
to the
is that?
play-in. So
How awesome is that,
this is
man?
another change that I feel like people have been talking about for a couple of years now because ever since additional seeds were granted to the LEC and I guess I don't think the LCS has actually ever sent 4 teams, but technically they could have if they went far enough internationally to warrant it. But there's been a lot of
XD.
talk about the LEC 4th seed basically being a bit of a meme. Saw it with Mad Lions in season 10. I don't think they had one in season 11, and then we saw it once again with Mad Lions in season 12. And
Mind you, they did lose to LCS 3 seeds, so it's not like they lost to some trash
yeah, but
garbage.
the point that I'm trying to make out here is that there's going to be a little bit of a battle before that extra for that last spot because unfortunately due to the VCS circumstances last year for the World Championship they couldn't go, so it was kind of just handed to the LEC as the 4th seed. Whereas now we actually get a best of 5 for it, but
It's a good change when LCS fans like it because like
yeah.
LCS fans know full well that our 4th seed should in theory lose to the LEC 4th seed, but we're fired up about it anyways. That's when
Just
you know
at the
it's a good
prospect
change.
of them potentially winning, it's great.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Last little caveat though is that in the future, this Riot has stated that this stage will expand to include more teams and regions. I would assume that that probably has to do with including like the number 2 team from the LLA, the CB LOL, the LJL stuff like that, or potentially
Yeah.
even putting LCK or LPL 5 seeds in there. It feels like Riot has a lot of room to grow with this thing, but for 2023 purposes, it's only going to be LEC and LCS 2 teams. One winner gets that extra spot, and now that one
Okay.
extra spot is for the play-in tournament. The play-in tournament is still, the format of it is still very similar. However, it is eliminating best of 1s, and we're getting best of 3s. So similar to MSI, 2 groups, 4 teams, double elimination best of 3 bracket with best of 5s as the final qualifying series, meaning that if it's a series to advance you into the Swiss stage of the tournament, it's a best of 5 and not a best of 3. So
Yeah.
no best of
And one
1s
of
in
the
play-ins.
one of the reasons why they can make this work now is because they did end up putting some of the smaller leagues, they combine them, right? Like Turkey is now part of Europe, for example.
Mm-hmm.
OS is part of, well, I guess those
PCS.
players can go to the PCS, but they could also be an NA resident. I don't know the exact specifics on that, but they had to like declare their residency or whatever. So you don't have a team from OS anymore. You have like a PCS slash OS team. You know, it's one of those. They were able to combine some leagues, and so you don't see the, no offense, just trash tier teams, right?
Yeah.
And I need to reiterate this: the reason why OS was trash wasn't necessarily their fault, right? The North America just took all of their good players and left them with the leftovers, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't really fair for them to compete.
One thing that I'm even thinking about right now is like I feel like the LCO, like they're obviously still going to be a league. Yes, it's unfortunate that they no longer have, a world's spot, but I'm surprised they just also weren't auto included into this world's qualifying series. Like
I thought that
LCO is
they
just
went
out of
into
here.
PCS. I thought that league. No, it didn't work that way. Am
Oh,
I making
maybe
things up?
did all those teams just get integrated into the PCS? I don't know
I don't
exactly
know.
either. So
This is a, for listeners. This is a
I
Blue Jay
no
misinformation moment. Don't
I'm
don't take my.
I'm pretty sure it was just that OS players were able to grant, like they had now have eligibility as PCS residents. I think that's all it
Okay.
was because I
I
looked
mean,
it up
I'm
right
not
here. Like
confident in.
there's still a
Yeah.
page and everything for the LCO, and for 2023 there's teams and rosters. So I
What site is this?
still on like the Leaguepedia. Like
Okay.
I mean it's no
Because if it was
official
LOL
announcement, but
Esports, I wouldn't trust it at all. That's all I was gonna say. No, I could be wrong. I might just be wrong about that. So
already. So where was I? So how many teams? Two teams are only advancing from play-ins now. That's another thing to keep into consideration. So the Swiss stage, which has been renamed from the group stage, is 16 teams. The top 4 teams from the LCK and the LPL are auto qualified. The top 3 teams from the LEC and the LCS are auto qualified. Finally, those 2 teams, that advance from the play-in tournament. Now,
right.
we do have best of ones here, but it's a different format. We did already talk about this a little bit in terms of how the Swiss stage works in some previous CFP episodes, but
There's
just as a
videos out
reminder,
there too. If
there,
people
yeah,
want to see a better visual, there is videos out there that people can just look up on YouTube.
definitely. But the short of it all is you're playing best of ones, 3 wins and you advance, 3 losses and you're out. And just some important things to note in the middle of that is for the first round, 2 teams from the same region cannot play each other. I assume this will have everything to do with not, region cannibalism or whatever they call it, where they don't want,
Yeah.
a full region just be knocked out after one stage.
You don't
And
want the LPL being knocked out by the LPL and the LCK being knocked out by the LCK, right? It's
yeah,
just not the way you want things to go.
and then lastly, for any elimination or promotion matches, meaning once you're trying to get 3 wins or once you're about to be at 3 losses, it will be a best of 3. So in theory, if you advance, 3-0 in the Swiss stage, that means you won your best of 1 in game 1, you won your best of 1 in game 2, and then you won a best of 3 as your third game. And then obviously you can alternate. You can go loss, loss, and then 3 wins in a row. And that last one would have to be best of 3. So you're playing anywhere between 5 and 8 games now.
Yeah.
I guess it actually could be more if you went to 0-2, then to 1-2, and then because you'd have to play another best of 3. So it'd actually be more than that. It'd be like
I love the
11
best of
games.
3 idea. If you're moving on or if you're being eliminated, it's a best of 3 now. I think that's one of the best changes. I really like this Swiss format. I think it's a very good change. I believe. Well, have to. I always say you have to wait and see how it goes. Same thing with like the LEC format that we talked about earlier. But from the just from looking at it, this looks very promising to me.
I would say to anybody who doesn't know the Swiss format or potentially has any concerns with the Swiss format, I would just urge you to look at the Counter-Strike scene. Obviously, if you don't play the game or watch the game or know anything about the scene, that's fine. But they have been utilizing the Swiss format for almost its entirety, and they always have fantastic group stages that usually results in the best teams advancing. No flukery going on, no tiebreaker matches going on. Like the best teams advance, and I think the Swiss stage does that. The Swiss format has always done that very, very well.
And then, like we mentioned earlier, after that, it's just the quarterfinals pretty much of
Yeah,
last
and
year's
then
knockout stage.
the playoffs or knockout stage is exactly the same. The seeding
Yeah.
is dependent on how you get out of the Swiss, how you promote out of the Swiss format. So if you get out of the Swiss stage 3-0, you're going to be a top seeded team in the playoff bracket, basically like being number one out of group stage in the old format.
Yeah. And so, as much as we had to talk about negative things at the start of the episode, there are definitely still things to be excited for about, including the LCS season, right? There's still lots, and then MSI and Worlds look very promising. So there are some good things to feel good about, some copium, if you will. I can't wait for Worlds, man. This last Worlds was so good. I like can't wait for the next one now. Even if we have to watch it at like 4 in the morning or whatever the hell it is.
It'll be probably quite late, yes.
We were spoiled this year, man. We were spoiled. But anyway, we just got a little bit of quick news, and then that should be it for the episode. JT, take away the quick news.
Yeah, we already talked about it a little bit, but the PCS ecosystem is expanding to include the LCO for 2023. As a special thing, this was mentioned in whatever article I read this in from Riot. It says OS or LCO players, I should say OS players, who are or have ever signed with an LCS or academy team can now switch their residency to PCS if they choose so. So obviously,
okay, so
that's
it doesn't
just
say anything about the teams then. I was just making things up, perhaps?
I think so, yes.
Hmm.
And then last up, a little small thing that we found out even a day or two ago. Wait, sorry, whatever, bro. Okay, you found it. The Clown Fiesta podcast found it, and we haven't seen anybody talk about it anywhere else. On Pastry Time's little wiki page, we were talking about Pastry Time earlier in the show because he's no longer going to be casting the LCS. He had a little PCS tag on his wiki page there, so maybe he's making a move over to the PCS to do some casting there. Maybe he's somehow going to be involved in coaching at all, or I don't know if there's any connections with like OS PCS. He used to be a coach, didn't he? Or he was friends with Spawn, who was a big coach there. So I don't know, but
it could be nothing. Just for clarity's sake, we might be grasping at straws here. But I just thought it was interesting that when I saw his wiki page, it said PCS residency. I went, oh, that's something. I wonder what that means. Maybe nothing. We'll find out soon, perhaps.
Next up, the LEC is increasing their minimum age for players from 17 to 18. Although it's important to note that players can still sign with orgs when they are 17. However, they cannot actually play in the LEC until they're 18. I didn't necessarily see any like discussion around this point, but I think it's probably a negative to the LEC in terms of potential players and newcomers, because we've seen a ton of young LEC, talent that have joined the league pretty much right as they basically can in terms of there being an age barrier. Reckless, that was the whole thing back in Season 3, Season 4. Caps, right when he came into the league, he was, 16 on whatever Turkish team he was playing on. Instantly got brought up into the LEC, EU, LCS at the time when he was 17. So while while Europe is known for kind of having a lot of great young talent, that young talent, they got to wait an extra year now.
Some esports careers could be really short too. So like you might be taking away one of someone's very few valuable LEC years, perhaps, right? I don't really know, but it does make me wonder. There was speculation that this could be because they're getting a gambling sponsor. I don't know how much actual fact is behind that. It's just a thing that I saw, and so I thought I would mention it. There's no nothing from my end proving that or disproving it. Just a thought I would add.
All right, and then last up, something that was on the front page of the League subreddit a few days ago that I think I found very interesting, and I think Blue did as well, was the CEO of GenG, Arnold, who I believe he's an American, I believe. I think he's Korean, but he's born and raised in America, but
he's a Korean American?
Yeah, I guess if that's, I don't know the exact term, but yeah.
Maybe he's an American Korean.
That could also work too. But he's the CEO of GenG, and he did an AMA on the League Reddit, and I just thought there were a lot of really good points and discussion points that he made in the AMA, namely being the sort of financial side of the LCK and his sort of concern for it. Because, if you go to the AMA and you look at the top comment is asking about if he's concerned at all with the LCK looking at the LCS as a model where player contracts have been getting higher and higher and higher as the years have gone by. Sponsors maybe haven't been around as long, and if we're assuming that State Farm and Bud Light might not be sponsors, those are big name sponsors, that's less money. The question was basically asking, is he concerned at all with the future of the LCK? And one thing that was super interesting from his answer that he gave was he said that LCK player salaries have surpassed the LPL and the LCS specifically after this offseason where there was a ton of big money contracts handed out to a ton of different players.
Yeah, we've seen what happens in the LCS when contracts were starting to get really, really high, or yeah, people started to worry as well, right? And so those quickly came down as of this year. Maybe we're going to see that in the LCK very soon. I don't know what the LCK contracts look like this year, but you would have to assume they're going to come down very quickly. The biggest standout for me in that AMA was when he said 30% of esports teams worldwide won't make it in the next 2 years, or that's what he thinks. That to me was a really big alarming thing, just as an esports fan in general. Like, rewind the clock 4 years ago or 5 years ago, there's this like, oh, esports is booming and it's $1 billion industry and blah blah blah. There's nothing but growth. Everyone's all excited and like back down to reality, back down to earth. There's a lot of esports teams that are struggling to make profit, and eventually people need to see the money. And anyways, definitely a worrying sign. I do think, just to be clear, in the long run, I think esports will find a way to be profitable, but if it doesn't do that in the near future, there's going to be a lot of esports orgs dropping, right? And just going a different way. We saw like 100 Thieves, for example, they came into the LCS, made a name for themselves, and cemented themselves as a legit team by joining a legit league. And then they just went full content creator because that was a way to make money, right? And so
And
you
then
kind of wonder if
even
other esports orgs are going to do similar things. You have to wonder.
well, then even recently with there's being like announcements of 100 Thieves laying off like a large percentage of their staff. So
Hmm.
even you
Of
look at
esports staff, though, right?
yes,
To be
yes,
clear, yeah.
but no, but I'm taking you take that as an example for one of the teams who we believe and I think everyone assumes has been doing very very well ever since their
Hmm.
inception. But
Yeah,
4 years later now, and they're laying off a large percentage of staff.
yeah. And actually, here's a point that I remember I wanted to bring this up a few months ago. Unbeheld in the live chat brings up a good point. Do you remember? I don't know if he was talking about the LCS. He says, bu- 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 um, I lost it now. Where is it? Oh, they thought that they could secure an exclusive broadcast rights in order to make big bucks like pro franchises. Do you remember there was discussion about the LCS going exclusive? Do you remember
Yeah,
this?
that was last off season, right?
That just didn't happen, and I
Yeah.
remember I wanted to ask Travis about it so many times whenever I called into Hotline League, but I just never got around to it, and that was something that had been on my mind. There was a chance that the LCS was going to be exclusive to Twitch or YouTube or whatever, right?
Yeah,
And
but I
that's something that just didn't happen.
yeah, I think the point Unbeheld is making though is that I think there was also discussions about the LCK exclusively being streamed on only like one platform this off season
Mm.
or sometime late last year, if my memory is correct here. If not, Unbeheld can obviously correct me, but I think that's what he was referring to.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know. I don't know exactly what you were referring to on Beheld. I'm sorry if I'm putting words in your mouth or anything. It rang a bell in my head of something that I meant to bring up quite a while ago and just completely forgot to bring it up. Is the exclusivity thing? I think that was a big thing for esports, and I don't see any reason for YouTube or Twitch to consider that, especially for the LCS where viewership has just consistently dropped. But anyways, okay, that's it for this episode, right? Anything else I
I
missed?
think so.
Okay. We actually managed to have a shorter episode, JNT 250. We rarely are able to do one that's about an hour long, but we managed for our first one. Once the league starts to get going again, I'm sure the episodes will get longer. But thank you guys for so much for coming back. We plan to do our episodes every week, like I mentioned earlier. Right now, the plan is Sundays. Sundays on Twitch. The plan is around 7 p.m. EST, 4 p.m. On the West Coast PST. So that's the plan for now. Remember, we are on all the podcast platforms supported by Anchor, so Spotify, Apple Podcasts, that kind of thing, and YouTube. The YouTube is where we get our most viewers. So guys, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe and comment. It helps us out tremendously. JT, anything else before we close out?
I think that's it. Be on the lookout for our next episode, especially because
Yeah,
Cubby.
yeah, true. Right. The next episode, we already recorded it, but the next one after this one has Cubby in it, so be sure to tune into that. Thanks so much for being with us, guys, and we hope to have a good year of CFP and hope you guys enjoy. We'll take care and see you next week.